Jeff lived the literary life, as I think all of you know, and we're going to commemorate Jeff there'll be a few poems that we've asked people to read at various points, but mostly what we want people to do is to share their stories of Jeff. So one of the things I'm leading off here is Jeff and I talked on the phone just about every night for the last 3 years or a bit longer. And one of the things we talked about was writers we like. I was at one time a professor in one of the humanities, so we talked books a lot. And that's why on the table over there, that's why there's quite a bit of Anthony Trollope. Jeff had just undertaken, at my suggestion, the project of trying to read Anthony Trollope because he had finished Dickens. So the Trollope project I found when I was sorting through his books was about 6 feet of Trollope on the shelf, waiting to go. Somebody that Jeff had always wanted me to get started on was Billy Collins, and I hadn't. So, but now I have. And this is from Billy Collins' book of poetry, Horoscopes for the Dead, and it's the title poem, Horoscopes for the Dead. Every morning, since you disappeared for good, I read about you in the daily paper, along with the box scores, the weather, and all the bad news. Some days I am reminded that today will not be a wildly romantic time for you, nor will you be challenged by educational goals, nor will you need to be circumspect at the workplace. Another day, I learn that you should not miss the opportunity to travel and make new friends, though you never cared much about either. I can't imagine you facing a new problem with a positive attitude, but you will definitely not be doing that or anything like that on this weekday in March. And the same goes for the fun you might have gotten from group activities, a likelihood attributed to everyone under your sign. A dramatic rise in income may be a reason to treat yourself, but that would apply more to all the Pisces who are still alive, still swimming up and down the stream of life or suspended in a pond in the shade of an overhanging tree. But you will be relieved to learn that you no longer need to reflect carefully before acting, nor do you have to think about or think more of others, and never again will creative work take a back seat to the business responsibilities that you never really had. And don't worry today or any day about problems caused by your unwillingness to interact rationally with your many associates. No more goals for you, no more romance, no more money or children, jobs or important tasks, but then again, you were never thus encumbered. So leave it up to me now, to plan carefully for success and the wealth it may bring, to value the dear ones close to my heart, and to welcome any intellectual stimulation that comes my way, though that sounds like a lot to get done on a Tuesday. I am better off closing the newspaper, putting on the clothes I wore yesterday when I read that your financial prospects were looking up, then pushing off on my copper-colored bicycle and pedaling along the shore road by the bay, and you stay just as you are. Lying there in your beautiful blue suit, your hands crossed on your chest like the wings of a bird who has flown in its strange migration not north or south, but straight up from the earth and pierced the enormous circle of the zodiac. So I think at this point, if anyone would like to come up and tell a story or two about Jeff, I would welcome someone to do that. And we'll sort of interrupt and work in, bring the other poems in, and then at the close of things, Linda will be reading a poem.
He said, I was so privileged to know Jeff. He had an astounding intellect, and his memory was amazing. I will miss our conversations and commiserations. I won't fail to think of him anytime I'm at grounds for thought. So that gave you like 30 seconds. So I'm astounded at how many people Jeff's touched. And I would love to have somebody come up and share.
I had the privilege of John asking me to write Jeff's obit, and I started it with you always knew where to find Jeff over, well, most recently over at Table 5. He had other locations. But this morning, as I was doing my work for BG India, I was trying to find a photo to go with a story on reproductive rights. A photo to go with a story on reproductive rights. And I pulled a story from one of the demonstrations that were held here at the Four Corners, and I looked at it, I said, there's Laura. There's Laura, and I turned around, and there's Sandy. And right between them was Jeff. So we did sometimes step out from the grounds. We enjoyed our conversations. And he's going to be great. He already is missed. It's not future tense, he already is missed. So whenever I come in, I sort of look over there.
And I'm very honored that John asked me to come today, and that Linda gave me a poem from a book that was very special to Jeff. It's by Robert Bly. And I think there's some books back on the table, you said, that were in Jeff's collection, or that are his favorites, that are here to share with everyone. So I thought I would take just a moment. I could spend the rest of the afternoon regaling stories of some of the wacky times that we've had with Jeff, along with some of the other friends here, through 18 years of a rib-off right here in Bowling Green, perfect attendance. So not only did he enjoy coffee, but he also enjoyed ribs. But I will now read this poem called An Empty Place. Empty places are white and light-footed. Taking the road means being willing to die, as the pigeon grass clump that dies so quietly. There is a joy in emptiness. One day I saw an empty corn cob on the ground, so beautiful. And where each kernel had been, there was a place to live. The eyes are drawn to the dusty ground and fall, small pieces of crushed oyster shell, like doors into the earth made of mother of pearl, slivers of glass. A white chicken's feather that still seems excited by the warm blood, and a corn cob, all kernels gone, room after room in its endless palace. This is the place of many mansions, when Christ has gone to prepare for us. Thank you.
I've known Jeff since we were pups, and there's just not been enough music here, so we're going to sing a song that he wrote. You all didn't know he was a songwriter. He's got a lot of talents probably you don't know about. He was a baseball pitcher. Did you know that, in Little League? He could actually get the ball over the plate, and so he didn't have to watch 14 or 20 walks go by, you know? He didn't have much velocity, though, so those of us in the field had to handle all the balls that came flying back. And he was actually a good thespian. He did a lot of high school productions, but I directed him in his first production. You probably didn't know that, John. Yeah, outside of like Christmas pageants, right, which don't count. But in 6th grade, I was the assistant director for A Midsummer's Night's Dream with Francis Brent. And he was Oberon, and I made sure he did the right stuff. I taught him everything he knew. I was the assistant director probably because I couldn't act, but I could memorize the lines, so I knew when they were off. He was working with a couple of other great people. Rosemary Weinberger was his queen, and Tom Apple was bottom. Tom co-wrote the song, by the way. So I don't want to play this song up too much. But we're getting there. Okay, we're getting there. I'm really proud to have been part of Jeff's enormously complicated spiritual life. So we all went to the First Presbyterian Church. Tom Apple and Jeff Barnes and we were all in the same Sunday school classes and everything. We struggled and we thought about things, and we saw there was some hypocrisy sometimes. We'd get kind of angry about that. But Jeff and I had a lot of long conversations late at night at Frisch's, or especially with too much coffee, or maybe sometimes too many beers, about life and philosophy and religion in our enormously complicated spiritual lives. So this song is part of his enormously complicated spiritual life, actually. Because being in the youth group at First Presbyterian Church, we had to do a Youth Sunday. Now John's laughing because he was responsible for some of them. So the youth had to take on a service, and at that point we were getting a little iconoclastic and maybe just trying to poke people a little bit, So, but we had free reign pretty much, which I appreciated. And so we were, putting together our service, and we thought at some point in the service, we needed a little gospel music. And so we sat down to write our gospel tune. And so I'd like you all to sing it with me now. I'll teach it to you. It's real easy. We had to teach a bunch of young kids, and they played instruments behind us like the scissors and the pencil sharpener and stuff like that. Tom Apple was a co-writer on this. I got to give him full credit. You heard what a great writer Jeff was, and everybody knows Tom Apple knows what a great musician he was. Well, neither of them shone on this tune. Okay, you would not know it from this tune, but I'm sure Tom wrote the music because he was playing it at the piano, and Jeff and I probably put the words together. So it does sort of reflect, I think, what you could say about his enormously complicated spiritual life, which it's called "Love Your Brother." All right, I'm going to give you the 4 lines, and you just repeat them so that you can join me when I start singing. Love your brother the way you love yourself. But if you don't love yourself, then don't love your brother that-a-way. But if you don't love yourself, then don't love your brother that-a-way. Because if you love your brother the way you love yourself, you'll go straight to heaven just like chicken gizzards frying on the griddle. You'll go straight to heaven just like chicken gizzards frying on the griddle. There you go. Are you ready? Now, I'll start singing. Whenever you feel like kicking in, you can kick in, all right? And we'll do it a couple times, because that's the way we did it in church. Now, in church, we wanted to have a bouncing ball behind us, but the tech wasn't that good at the time. That was 45 years ago, okay? But you can imagine Tom Apple playing the piano and the cacophony. We didn't have choirs. We had a cacophony behind us when we sang this song, and it goes like this. Love your brother the way you love yourself. But if you don't love yourself, then don't love your brother that-a-way. Because if you love your brother the way you love yourself, you'll go straight to heaven just like chicken gizzards frying on the griddle. Everybody, love your brother the way you love yourself. But if you don't love yourself, then don't love your brother that-a-way. Because if you love your brother the way you love yourself, you'll go straight to heaven just like chicken gizzards frying on the griddle. Thank you. That's for Jeff.
Jeff came into my life in 1985 when I married one of his friends and another writer. And they would hang out at our house. Well, actually it was my husband's house too. And they'd read to each other, and the wine would flow. And then they'd read some more. And then the wine would pour. And then they'd drag out their own work. And it was in these tattered spiral notebooks that looked like horses had danced on them. And they'd start reading to each other their own stuff, and then they'd start talking philosophically. And if you've had conversations with Jeff And you're like me, you're like, I think I know those words, but I'm not really sure how they go together. And put him with my husband, and that was a given. I didn't. And at some point, I would wander away to bed, after usually accusing them of not considering the little people and just focusing on the esoteric, theoretical things, and that the world wasn't philosophy. And then I'd storm off and go to bed, and sometime around about the time the sun came up, my husband would come to bed, and sometimes Jeff would be in the living room. We lived about 3 doors away from his parents, and he was living with his parents at the time. Sometimes he was at the living room because apparently nobody appreciated him coming in at like 5 and 6 in the morning loudly, because he'd been very loud a few doors down. And sometimes Jeff would be up making breakfast. We're not breakfast eaters. So he would just get into the refrigerator and find things and call it breakfast. And like French toast made with bagels was one. And spaghetti with jelly was another one, because spaghetti's like bread and toast, and jelly goes on toast. And so yeah, that's my introduction to Jeff in the first year I was married, and that's what I thought married life was. And I wasn't all wrong. So it was wonderful knowing Jeff. I'm glad he played a role in the lives of my children, who all showed up today, stopping their busy lives to come for this. So that right there says something about what a presence Jeff was in the lives of people in Bowling Green. And I'm pretty glad that he didn't get a job as a short order cook for breakfast somewhere.
Because Barnes was finishing writing and rewriting his work. And I would look at him, and he would give me a sign or a signal that he was ready. So I bowed to His Highness and then let him read. But we had a blast, I'm telling you. And I have known Barnesy for over 40 years. And he never once disappointed me with his skill at arguing, because I'll leave you with this. I'm an atheist, and he is a spiritual person. I am not. And he would just nip me right on the hind end in our arguments, and he would almost invariably win them. Not enough to convince me, because I'm a stubborn crap, but anyway, it was a pleasure knowing the physical Jeff Barnes. He's somewhere. He's a curmudgeon.
I really hadn't planned any comments because, like all of us, we'd planned on seeing Jeff here every day at the shop for a long time. So while I'm certainly glad to see everybody here, I'm sorry it's for such a sad occasion, for sure. Really, just a couple comments. John, you mentioned that his volume of work was almost, you think, 3 million words. It surprised me a little bit because I thought he wrote more than a word an hour while he was here over the years. And you heard Lou talk a little bit about some of the poetry readings that he had over here over the years, and he really was, I think, for anybody who knew him well, truly a remarkable writer, and I'm really looking forward to Kelly's work ahead of her and what may come from those writings. But one of my favorite stories about Jeff was, this was really back probably in 91, 92, so well over 3 decades ago, right? If people who've been coming here as long as Jeff has, remember when the shop was just that front little section up there, all right? And we had one of our first little poetry readings we had ever done, and it was an open mic night. Louis read, some other locals, Jeff read. For me and Laura, the shop was still pretty new. Events like this were very nerve-wracking for us because we never knew if anybody was going to show. We didn't know what people were going to say, particularly when it came to poets. And Jeff got up and was one of the third or fourth poets, and he was reading some great works, and he stopped and he talked a little bit about this poem, and he talked about it how the title of the poem was longer than the poem itself. And then he recited the title, and it was a good 4 or 5 sentences long. And in the pause between when he started this poem, a woman stands up in the back of the audience and goes, "That's my poem! He stole my poem!" All right, and everybody kind of looks around like this, like, and I'm over here in the corner going, wow, someone's really gonna have to do something about that for sure. And no one really knew what to do, because for a moment I think everybody thought it was actually part of the poetry reading, all right? Well, he recited the title again, and the woman decided that maybe actually he hadn't stolen her poem. And fortunately, we went on with the poetry reading without incident. So, you know, seeing Jeff for every day for 30 plus years, that was still the one that came to mind. Seeing him try to stand there while this person accused him of stealing her work. So thanks again, everybody, and cheers to Jeff, for sure.
Jeff is a funny guy. Like, you know, we're talking a lot about his poetry, we're talking a lot about everything else. He was a funny guy. Some of which I don't think I could say because it's probably a little more R-rated than should be said out loud here.
Do it.
But on a side note, if anybody wants to hear some fun stories, please come see me afterwards. But Jeff was also an avid lover of baseball, if anybody knew that about him. I know sports. I don't know baseball very well. If anybody else knew Jeff, he didn't hear very well out of one ear, he didn't see really great out of the other eye, and I unfortunately got stuck sitting next to his bad ear on opening night one night. So I was sitting next to Toby and Jeff, and I think it was Toby was on the other side, Jeff, and then me. And he leans over and he goes, "Well, you got to give me the play-by-play." So I said, "Okay, 13 did something. I think 33 hit a ball and it went that way, and maybe that was Miguel Cabrera. I don't know. Pick football, I got you. Pick hockey, I got you. Pick baseball. It's a very boring sport. I'm sorry to all the baseball lovers out there. It's way more fun when you're at the game, but when you're kicking back a few Miller Lights and trying to explain the game to somebody who knows it way better than you. I think we're about the 7th inning. And Jeff leans over to me, and in the most Jeff way possible, and I apologize if I offend anybody, "Jesus Christ, you suck at this." Is what Jeff said. And I said, "You're absolutely right. Hey, Toby, do you want to switch seats?" And I think it was about, 2 innings later. I think we won. I don't remember, but it was a good time had by all. But, I think everybody in this room is going to miss Jeff. His sense of humor, I don't think, could be matched by all of us combined.
I just want to say, on the record, Jeff was down with the kids. I'm 25. Jeff was down with the kids, and I never felt so seen by someone who probably knew so little about me than my very brief interactions with Jeff. He felt like he knew exactly what would interest me or what I would want to talk about. So he'd come up and get his iced coffee, probably iced coffee around number 3 or 4, and he'd be like, "It's fucking Republicans, right?" And I was like, "What do you mean, Jeff?" He's like, "Look, my condolences on Roe v. Wade." He had all the, but really, he knew what mattered to me. He was like, he knew that stuff mattered to me. LGBTQ rights, women's rights, he cared a lot, and he made that really clear every time that he came to talk to me, and he knew my name within the first 3 hours of knowing me. So
I feel a little intimidated because I feel like I'm not entitled to have the feelings that I have today, because I feel like I love Barnes too much for how I'm feeling right now, and I feel a little bit like I'm not even entitled to feel this way. I didn't know him long enough to feel the way I feel right now. But I want to tell you a little bit about what he meant to Kate and what he meant to me because of that. Who Barnes was for my wife? he saw her through some really hard times. And when I came along, he was just a fixture, right? He was part of our lives, and I felt really lucky to get to know him because of her. And Barnes, every time I saw him, was just full of knowledge and love and whatever you needed in that moment. I mean, just what an amazing man, just bigger than one body could be. He showed Kate love in a time when I don't know if she knew what love was anymore, but Barnes was one of a number of friends who was just there for her when she needed people in a way I don't think she was willing to admit. And I'm so grateful he was, because I don't know who she would be today without him and the other people who loved her the way that they did together. They saw her through to who she is today. And gosh, Barnes is just Barnes. I mean, we are so lucky to be a community that has had a Barnes. Kate made jokes about, the kind of unacceptable, maybe, messages that Barnes was. Oh my gosh, y'all, come see us if you want to hear about some of those things, because he was just hilarious beyond measure and inappropriate in ways that are so inappropriate that they're appropriate. So, I just want to celebrate Barnes, and let's raise a glass of whatever we got and whatever it should be.
Where's the Rolling Rock?
Yeah, it should maybe be something else, but what we got right now is good enough. And to Barnes.
Since we moved from Bowling Green, Brownsford thought has always been sort of a place. And Jeff was just as much an institution to us as this place. So we will miss him terribly, like we miss you all. Thanks.
Because I was usually next to Barnes when he was saying all of those terrible things and trying to say equally terrible things back. And he loved it. He laughed uproariously when he thought something was funny. I'll make this quick because I'm not going to last long, but one of my first memories of Grounds and Barnes was the Black Swamp Arts Festival, one of the earliest, where he spoke. He did poetry outside, and I didn't know him. I didn't have any interactions with him prior. And he's reading, and I'm not really a poetry guy. But what I loved was, as he was dropping the F-bomb, a woman on a rascal with an American flag up the back just rides by. He made an impact on a lot of people. But I can't help but think of that as being basically Barnes's life encapsulated. The world just shit on the guy. He had no good luck. But he managed to be one of the most beautiful souls ever to walk this planet. And I love him. And God damn it, I'm pissed he didn't tell me he was sick. But I also thank him from the bottom of my heart to just let it happen. So thank you all for being here.
But just an absolute fixture. I remember him and my dad always talking at the table and by the window here. And I was there for a lot of those conversations. And it was actually the day I found out his name wasn't Barnes. Is the story I want to tell, because it was so classic Barnes. And I go, "It's your last name?" He's like, "Yeah." I'm maybe like 7 to 9, somewhere in that range. And I go, "Oh, like Barnes and Noble." in the most Jeff Barnes way possible. He's he's kind of talking out of the side of his mouth. He's got one eye up, and he goes, "You believe those motherfuckers never gave me a dime?" I just had to get up and say that. I will always remember him as that motherfucker that never gave a dime. So, that's all.
We all got pieces that we get to carry around with us. So I took him to the hospital, and it was so fast. But in the hospital, he was reading the last poem that he was writing, and I can't find it. And I have asked Kelly to look for it. I'm not sure he had written it down, and I hope he did, because otherwise it would be lost to us, and it was beautiful. Love and work were my great happiness. That other people die, the source of my great, terrible, and inarticulate one grief. In my time, I grew tall and huge of frame. Obviously possessed of a disconnected head, I had a perfect heart. The end came quickly and completely without pain. One quiet night, as I was sitting writing next to you in bed, words chosen randomly from a tired brain, it like them, suitable and fitting. Let none regret my end who called me friend. So John and I went through his apartment, which was sparse on practical things and loaded with books and music. And so we brought some of his favorite books, and maybe some of you have already perused them, but please take one, two, and remember Jeff. And thank you, Laura and Kelly, for everything you've done, letting us be here. They've provided the coffee and the donuts. Help yourselves. And thank you so much for being here today.
BG Independent News is made possible with support from people like you. Help keep news in Bowling Green free and accessible to everyone by becoming a contributor today. Visit bgindependentmedia.org/support to help Bowling Green's best source for local news, arts coverage, reviews, opinions, campus information, and community updates.